We will have this available as a encore presentation at here probably within a week or so. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ellen Barra, and I'm a specialist with our Provider Outreach and Education team. On the call with me today is my friend and colleague, Aline Ziegler, and Aline is going to be placing information into the chat for you, and then also we'll be reading off the questions and things that we have at the end of this presentation today. So the first thing we have is our disclaimer, and we do include this on all of our presentations. What we have for you today and the education that we're going to provide to you is a tool to assist you in billing Medicare appropriately for the services that you are providing. Medicare's goal is that you understand the rules and regulations for the services that you're providing and therefore bill them correctly to Medicare so that you can get paid on that original claim. And then you don't have to worry with any delays, overpayments, anything like that. Medicare rules, however, do change. If you've been with Medicare any length of time, you know that they can change often. The information published by CMS in the laws, regulations, and rulings do determine final coverage. We will provide questions to your or responses to your questions, but again, Medicare rules determine that final coverage. CMS does prohibit recording of the presentation for profit-making purposes. So if you're doing screenshots or recording, we would ask that you not do that. Again, we are recording this presentation and it will be available both on our website and on our YouTube channel, probably within a week and a half or so following this presentation. So the first slide that we have for you is just a list of acronyms. As you're aware, CMS and Medicare has a lot of acronyms that go along with that program. And so these are the ones we're going to be using during our presentation today. We wanted to kind of gather them up in one spot for you. So the purpose of our education today and our webinar today is really to help you understand the correct use of the assistant at surgery modifiers. And you can see those listed there on your screen. There is the AS, the 80, 81, and 82. Each of these have a specific meaning and they have specific processing instructions for us as your Medicare contractor. So we're going to provide information on the CMS determination of when an assistant at surgery is appropriate. And we'll provide you in the resource section of the links where you can go to find that information. We're going to talk about the Medicare payment and then any required actions if it has been submitted with an incorrect modifier. As part of this presentation today, we did do some data analysis. And as part of that data analysis, we've identified about 837 overpayments. We have forwarded this information to another department who will be setting those up. So if you have billed incorrectly and Medicare has made payment, then you probably will be hearing from us shortly to take that money back. And we'll talk about what some of those issues were as we continue on. So here's the definition of an assistant at surgery. An assistant at surgery is a physician or non-physician practitioner who is actively assisting the physician in performing that surgical procedure. The assistant at surgery provides more than simply ancillary services. That's going to be your surgical tech, any nursing staff that you may have available. Excuse me. So the gist of this information is they're actively participating in that surgery. Your documentation will show their activities, will identify the fact that the surgeon has had an assistant at surgery to help them with the surgery itself. So CMS determines whether an assistant at surgery can be provided. And this is within the within the Medicare physician fee schedule relative value file. I can't talk this morning. And it has an indicator on the particular procedure code concerning whether or not you can do an assistant at surgery. This is all based on industry standards, CMS rules and regulations, etc. And so where you'll find this then is in the column titled Assistant at Surgery. There are some indicators, which I'll show you on the next slide, that then will determine whether or not Medicare can make payment for that. We did have a pre-submitted question, and the question was, would you use an assistant at surgery modifier when billing an add-on code? So an add-on code is going to be each additional service that you're doing. A lot of times that's the definition of that. And the answer to that question is yes, as long as that add-on code meets the requirements that we're getting ready to discuss. So these are the assistant at surgery indicators. So you can see the first one there, the 0 means that you would have to provide documentation. This indicator is going to deny on the front end. You will need to request an appeal or a redetermination. And with that, you're going to provide the documentation to support what was the medical reason as to why that assistant at surgery was necessary. One indicator means that Medicare is not going to pay for an assistant at surgery. It really doesn't matter the situation that you have. Medicare simply does not pay. And then an indicator 2 means that Medicare does pay for assistant at surgery services. You don't need to provide additional documentation. You would just bill for that correctly, and then Medicare will make payment for that. And then the 9, the last one there, means that the concept doesn't apply. You'll find this on your evaluation and management codes, your radiology services, that type of thing. So let's talk about that first modifier. Modifier AS, you can see there, number 1, you have to accept assignment on the claim. And this is assistant at surgery services provided by a non-physician practitioner. You can see them listed there, your physician assistant, nurse practitioner, and then clinical nurse specialist. In addition to that, this modifier is only applicable to the non-physician practitioners. If someone else is acting as an assistant at surgery, such as an MD or a DO, this modifier is inappropriate for that. And the reason behind that is because of the payment. You can see there in the next to last bullet, the payment amount for a non-physician practitioner is 85% of what an MD or a DO would receive. And then Medicare pays an assistant at 16% of the surgical fee. So for a non-physician practitioner, then your allowed amount is going to be 85% of that 16%. And then, of course, your payment amount is going to be 80% of the allowed amount. So this is not incident to a type of situation. This is really where your non-physician practitioner is the one who is providing this service. So what that means then is that this must come into us under your non-physician practitioner's provider number, which means they have to be enrolled with Medicare. Your physician cannot submit both the surgical procedure code and then a separate line using that AS modifier. If your NPPs are not credentialed for some reason, then you need to take steps to do that. And before they get credentialed, you would not be able to bill Medicare nor the patient for the assistant at surgery services. Very important that they have to be credentialed. The next modifier is the most common modifier that we have for assistant at surgery services. And this is when that assistant services are provided by an MD or a DO. They also are going to bill under their provider number. Payment for this, or the allowed amount for this, is 16% of that surgical fee schedule. And again, then the surgeon's documentation contained within that operative report will identify the assistant at surgeon or assistant at surgery, will identify the activities that they're providing, why that was medically necessary, etc. The next modifier that we have then is Modifier 81. This is used a lot less. And the documentation will show that again, will show the assistant and their activities, but the assistant is really providing minimal surgical assistant services. Now, again, this is going to be more than what your surgical tech could be providing, any nursing staff that are involved in that surgery, etc. This one also pays at 16% of the Medicare fee schedule, or allows at 16% of the fee schedule amount for that surgery. What you want to look at in determining whether or not this is the appropriate modifier is really the services that are provided by that surgical assistant. If they are simply minimum, then this would be the appropriate modifier. Again, this one is a fairly rare modifier for Medicare. The next one that we have then is Modifier 82. And Modifier 82 is specific to teaching hospitals. When using this one, what you're saying is that a qualified resident was not available to provide the assistant at surgery services. And so therefore you are using someone else. And this again would be an MD or a DO. If you're using a non-physician practitioner, you would still use that AS modifier. Non-physician practitioners can only use that modifier when they're billing for assistant at surgery services. So let's look at the requirements for that. You can see there a qualified resident, and remember the definition, a qualified resident is not available. So what's a qualified resident? Well, it is one who is within the teaching program that applies to that surgery that's been performed. So obviously that resident then would have to be able and would have to have the knowledge in order to provide those assistant at surgery services. It also means that the resident is available. If they're off doing something else, obviously you don't have the availability of that person and you are using someone else, using another MD or DO, then that's when you would use that modifier 82. The other thing that you have to do when you're using modifier 82, and this is going to be information that's coming from the surgeon and from the assistant at surgery, that person, you must complete a certification statement. Now, you don't have to send that into Medicare when you submit your claim. It does, however, have to be available should Medicare request it. And this is the copy of the certification statement itself. If we requested, obviously we would need to provide this to Medicare. But basically what this is saying is that you're doing this service in a teaching hospital and there isn't a qualified resident available. And so that's why an MD or a DO then would be the one who is providing this service. That's when they would use that modifier 82. Again, if it's a non-physician practitioner in this same situation, you still have to use the AS modifier. So we have a pre-submitted question that came in, and it says both a physician assistant and a resident are present during the surgery and they are providing services. Can we submit both? Well, generally speaking, in response to this, Medicare only allows one assistant at surgery. I believe that that second claim that would come into us would deny on the front end. You would need to request an appeal and then provide documentation to support more than one assist at surgery. If both the PA and the resident are part of that, but the resident did not provide services, you would not need to do this certification statement because you wouldn't be using the modifier 82 on that. So what you would need to look at in that situation is your actual documentation. What is that physician assistant doing? What is that resident doing? And the resident services, of course, would be part of the teaching itself. So it would all go back to, back to documentation in order for Medicare to pay for more than one assistant at surgery. So again, now we go back to the documentation. That operative report has to identify the activities of that assistant, not just the surgeon themselves, but they have to identify the name of that assistant. They have to identify the activities of that assistant at surgery. Now, it can be within the surgeon's operative report. It can also be within a separate report if the assistant at surgery, excuse me, the assistant at surgery is also making a report of that operation itself. Again, it would have to be available should Medicare request it. We do have some additional information here for you. When you submit an assist at surgery claim, you're going to use a type of service 8. The type of service 8 simply identifies it as an assistant, and therefore we're going to be looking for one of those 4 modifiers as part of the claim. And then that type of service 8 will also help to generate the correct payment. Global surgery rules don't apply to an assistant at surgery. That applies to the surgeon themselves. And so when you're providing the assistant, excuse me, when you're providing the assist, none of any additional services that you're providing after that surgery, if you're doing an E&M, something like that, none of that will be part of those global days. Again, that's only for the surgeon. You do want to make sure that you're submitting the same procedure codes as the surgeon. Get together with their office, make sure, you have all of the correct codes on there. You can submit multiple codes, obviously, if you're assisting at multiple different procedures. We show you there again, the allowed amount is the 16% of the surgery procedure code. And then that last bullet is another area where we saw a lot of incorrect claims. And this is where the surgeon is submitting for both the surgery and the assistant at surgery. As we stated earlier, the assistant needs to be submitting their own claim, regardless of which one of the modifiers is appropriate. And so for your non-physician practitioners, they're going to submit under that AS. Your MDs or your DOs are going to submit either the 80, 81, or 82. So we did see quite a few claims where the surgeon was billing for both the surgery and the assistant at surgery. And this is incorrect for Medicare processing. Again, as I stated earlier, if there are payments that we made on these, if we did not catch these front end, then we will be going back and doing overpayments on those. We also encourage you to do self audits, and that's kind of talked about on this next page. If you see that you have received an incorrect payment, then you want to do a SIR or a clerical error reopening. And we give you the examples there. You're submitting the AS modifier when it's an MD or a DO. We did see a few of those. Submitting the 80, 81, or 82 when the actual performing provider is a non-physician practitioner. We saw a lot more of those. And then the surgeon submitting both the surgery and the assist. The numbers were a little bit less on that than submitting the incorrect modifiers under a non-physician practitioner. So what we're asking you to do here is really to do a self-audit, to go back into your files to verify that you have billed appropriately. And this really becomes important when you have used the assistant as a non-physician practitioner and you have used something other than the AS modifier. The payment amount on that is incorrect. And as a matter of fact, if you have received a payment on that, then you have received too much money from Medicare. So we would ask that you refund that difference back to us. You can do that through that clerical error reopening. And as you're doing that, then you would be changing the modifier that appears on the claim. When you do that, then it is going to generate an overpayment, and then you'll be notified through that overpayment process. You can also, however, do a voluntary refund. So if you go back through your files and you identify, oh, wait a minute, we've been paid, incorrectly here, then you can go ahead and put together a list of those, send back the incorrect amounts that Medicare has paid to you. Our overpayment department then will process those overpayments and then will adjudicate or adjust those particular claims. Again, in the data that we pulled on this, we have about 837 lines that were billed to us incorrectly. However, this does not include all services. The data that we pulled was probably about 6 months, the most recent 6 months of processed claims. So given what we found on this data, we know that there are additional claims out there that have been paid inappropriately by Medicare. So the next thing that we want to provide to you are your resources. And my papers won't move. So the physician fee schedule lookup tool, the first one that's listed there, kind of goes along with that second one. The second one shows you how to use that tool. So what you can do with this is you can enter your surgery procedure code, and then it will bring back to you the different columns from the relative value file that go along with that code. And so your assistant at surgery column will be one of those things that come back, and then you can look for the specific indicator. The next thing that we have is simply the relative value file itself. You'll want to look at the dates for that to make sure you're pulling up the correct one for your date of service. And then we have information for you there on the Medicare Claims Processing Manual from the Internet Only manuals that discusses assistant at surgery services. Chapter 12 gives you the kind of rules that go along with assistant at surgery, and then chapter 26 provides the claim form instructions on how you submit that, which is going to be part of the modifier usage and then also the type of service usage. We have a section of the Social Security Act listed for you there that also discusses the assistant at surgery information. And then the next thing that we have are the assistant at surgery modifier fact sheets. And this is available on our website. So you can go in, you can see the information on the AS modifier, on the 80, 81, and 82. We've also provided information there on how to request a clerical error reopening for those situations where you find that you've used the incorrect modifier. And then the last one there is unsolicited voluntary refunds. And this is where you're simply refunding the money back to us as opposed to going through the clerical error reopening process. And both of those are correct. If you identify an overpayment, you can use either one of those in order to start the process to refund that money back to us. Another document that is available for you, and I did not put on this slide, is a CMS document about global surgery. And Aline has placed the link for that within the chat function. Now, this global surgery booklet is about 15 pages long, I think something along those lines. And most of it has to do with the surgeon and how global surgery applies to the surgeon. There is a small section in that booklet, though, that does deal with the assistant at surgery. Um, so we wanted to provide that for you here today. And again, Aline has placed that in the chat. Now, before we get into the questions and answers, which will be next, I do want to let you know about a National Provider Enrollment Conference. CMS and Noridian Healthcare are partnering together to provide this conference. You can see the details there, August 28th and 29th, and it's going to be held in San Diego. This is free, the conference, there's no charge for that. If you downloaded the presentation, then the description and registration is a link for you to provide you with the different breakout sessions that they're going to have. And then you can register for that and see the times and everything else. So now we're going to go into questions and answers. And before we take the ones that are in the chat, we did receive several, in fact, multiple from our registration process. So I want to go ahead and talk about those first. So the first question was, what billing is appropriate when the OBGYN surgeon needs to bring in another MD or DO to deal with adhesions, to deal with something else that's going on with that patient? Well, in this situation, you don't have an assistant at surgery situation. You really have co-surgeons. They're both working together to accomplish the surgical procedure code for that particular patient. And so the modifier that you would use for that would be modifier 62. Again, both practitioners are going to use that modifier. Both practitioners are going to bill the same procedure codes. And then Medicare has information on our website under our modifier fact sheet section that talks about the payment information for modifier 62. Now, this is when both of them are working within the same operative site. If the two surgeons are doing surgery at the same time, but they're not working together to accomplish the same surgery, then they simply both bill the surgery. Modifier 62 would not be available there. Another pre-submitted question that we have is that the resident, or the question is, does the resident need to be available for the entire surgery or only the key and critical portions? Well, the availability of that assistant would be determined by that surgeon. What did they need that assistant at surgery to accomplish for that patient? Now, what we're talking about here today is not the same thing as the teaching physician guidelines. Under the teaching physician guidelines, the surgeon, the MD or the DO, or the assistant at surgeon, the MD or the DO, can bill for the services by the resident under the teaching physician guidelines. And we do have information available on our Encore page in our YouTube channel where we just talked about teaching physicians. The next question was, can Medicare allow an assistant at surgery when the surgery is either a co-surgery situation or a team surgery when the surgeons are billing with modifier 62 or 66? Medicare doesn't have any written restrictions on that. You would need to have documentation available should Medicare request that. That would again show the assistant at surgery activities and why that was medically necessary when you had at least two surgeons, and with the co-surgery situation, more than that, involved in that procedure. The next question that we had is, can we submit an intraoperative consult as an assistant at surgery service? And the answer to that would be no, unless that intraoperative consult was happening and they're doing that while they're completing the surgery for the patient. If the intraoperative consult is not actually assisting within that surgery, in the surgical site, in the surgical room, then you would need to look to other services that could be appropriate, as to what that consultant actually provided to that patient. Oh, sorry. Another pre-submitted question that we had is, if your surgeon is performing a separate surgery, is one of them the assistant? And as we talked about just a second ago, if you're both acting as primary surgeons for that patient, whether you're in the same surgical site or a different one, then the assistant at surgery would not apply. You'd need to look at either modifier 62 for the co-surgery or modifier 66 for assistant at surgery. Another pre-submitted question that we have is, must you submit a charge to Medicare if you know that Medicare will not pay? And yes, you still need to be submitting that charge to Medicare if you're going to charge the patient for that service. When we process that claim, we determine the patient liability for that service. And then you'll be able to see that, the patient will be able to see that, and then you can collect whatever your remittance notice identifies that you can collect. The next pre-submitted question that we have is, do you use the assistant at surgery modifiers to an NOC code? Yes, what you would do in this situation is you would use item 19 to show that this is an assistant at surgery, and that you would include the modifier in that section. In addition to that, you would also be billing that excuse me, with a type of service 8 rather than a type of service 2 for the actual surgery. The next pre-submitted question that we have is, if you're performing additional services on the same day that you're doing an assistant at surgery, would you append modifier 25 to those additional services? And that answer to that would be no. Again, global surgery does not apply to the assistant at surgery. And so therefore, if they do have additional services they're providing on that date or during the global period, they would just bill for those. Documentation, of course, must support the medical necessity of that. And then the last question that we had is, if two surgeons are performing separate procedures but through the same incision, how would you submit that? Well, the first thing that you want to look at in that situation is, are they really doing separate procedures, or are they working together to accomplish the surgery that the patient needs? If they're working together, that's either a co or a team surgery situation. If they're not, it's not, the purpose of what they're both doing is not one procedure for the patient, but it really is two separate situations that you have going on, then you could bill separately for that. Documentation is going to have to be very clear as to what is specifically happening during that time frame for that patient. That's the pre-submitted questions that we have. We'll go ahead and open it up then for any questions that we've received in our chat function.
Thanks, Ellen. We have gotten a few questions. And the first one that came in, I'm just going to ask them in the order in which they were received. Tiffany says, what has to be specifically documented before being able to add the modifier for an assistant, please?
The specific documentation is, number one, the assistant at surgery, their name, and then also what are they doing? What activities are they doing within the surgery to provide the assistant to that surgeon? And again, you want to make the differentiation between the activities that your surgical tech or your nursing staff that may be involved are doing and what the assistant at surgery is actually doing for that surgeon. Next question.
Thank you. Next question. Can modifier 22 applied for assistant at surgery? Please advise.
Okay, that's a really good question. And that one I'm going to have to research because I don't know for sure if we can take both a 22 and one of the assistant at surgery modifiers on the same claim. So I will find out the answer to that and then I will send that out to all attendees.
Very good. Thank you. Kayla asks, does CMS have a list of acceptable CPT codes to charge these modifiers for? If not, is there an exclusion list of CPT codes not to charge these for?
This is in the relative value file. We have the link to the relative value file within your resources section. In addition to that, we have that code lookup tool. So it's not a separate list, it's simply on the relative value file itself. There is a separate column that says assistant at surgery, and then you can look for the indicators. Depending on the indicator that applies there, will tell you whether or not you can have an assistant at surgery. A 0 indicator means you have to have documentation. A 1 indicator means that we are not going to pay for this. And then a 2 indicator means that we do pay assistant at surgery services. Next question.
Okay, now this one is kind of long. And so if this is something you need to take back, just let me know, but I'm literally just reading these in the order that they were received. Christina says, 33508 is an add-on code for endoscopic harvest of a vein during a CABG, which is often performed by the NPP only. Should the 33508/AS be billed strictly under the NPP who performed the service? WPS would not expect it be billed additionally under the surgeon because they did not perform said service, correct?
Okay, in the situation that you're describing, you have an NPP who is coming in and doing a particular portion of the total procedure, the bypass graft that's being done. This is a question I'm going to have to take back also. I don't think, well, let me just say this. I'll take the question back and find out the correct billing instructions for that, and we'll provide that back to everyone. Thank you for that question.
Very good. Next question comes from Misty. She says, where is the type of service 8 located or entered for assist?
Well, on the CMS 1500 form, it is in box 24, and there's a place where you put your date of service, the location, your 2-digit place of service information, and then you put your type of service. Now, where that information goes when you're entering it, within your particular system, that I have no idea about. We do have information available on our website. If you go into our website, which is the WPSGHA.com, and over on the right-hand side, there will be a box that says Quick Links, and you can go into that box, choose the EDI link, and then once you get to the EDI site, choose Medicare. You'll have to scroll down a little bit, but choose Medicare. And then when you're on that Medicare page, there is a CMS 1500 837P crosswalk. And so what you can do then is identify where that type of service goes, again in box 24, and then what loops and segments that goes into on your electronic claim. Next question.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I will work to get the link for that before we leave today. I'll try to get that so I can drop that in the chat.
Okay,
Next
thanks, Elaine.
question.
Uh-huh.
Does there need to be separate documentation from the assist, or can the surgeon document the assist and what they were doing?
The surgeon can document that, and that can simply be part of the operative report. You can do separate reports if you choose to, but you don't have to. Next question.
Perfect. I got to remind myself to mute and unmute. Next question comes from Robin. Can you bill using a modifier for type of surgery nurse specialist?
You mean a clinical nurse specialist?
Well,
Is
she
that what it
says
says?
surgery nurse specialist. So maybe Robin can clarify that within the chat.
Yeah, Robin, if you would care to do that, we would appreciate that. If it's a non-physician practitioner, such as a clinical nurse specialist, and this is someone who can be credentialed with Medicare, then they can provide assistance at surgery services based on the state requirements, and then they would use that AS modifier. If it's a surgery nurse that is not able to be credentialed, then no, you would not bill for that person's services as an assistant at surgery. Next question.
All right, thank you. This is from Caroline. Can you repeat if these modifiers are billed on both the surgeon's claim and the assistant's claim?
No, they are not. They should not be billed on both. Your surgeon bills a claim with their surgery procedure codes and their amounts. The assistant at surgery bills the procedure codes, the appropriate modifiers, and then their amounts. No, the surgeon should not be billing for both. That's one of the errors we found in those 837 claims.
Thank you for clarifying that. I did find the crosswalk real quick and I dropped it in the chat. Sorry, I didn't type anything else with it. I literally just dropped the link for that crosswalk in there just so everybody knows to look for that. Next question is from Cassandra, and she says, if a surgeon uses an assist for all surgeries of a specific type, such as a knee replacement, is reporting for assist at surgery appropriate, or is that a standard of care and not appropriate? And she adds, the NCCI has an indicator of 9 for the CPT code.
Okay. Now, number one, the NCCI is not where you want to be looking. Where you want to be looking is the relative value file. If that surgery procedure code, and I can't imagine that it would have a 9, it's either going to have a 0, 1, or 2. So if it has the 0, it means that Medicare is going to need to see documentation. If it has the 1 indicator, then Medicare is not going to pay for an assist. If it has the 2 indicator, then Medicare will pay for that assist in that surgery. So what you want to look at is your procedure code for your total knee replacement or whatever service that you're providing, and then look at those indicators to determine whether or not you can actually bill for that. I kind of
All
thought
right,
a
thank you.
total knee replacement did use an assist, but I'm not a surgeon, so I don't know that for sure.
Right. Next question, if the indicator is 1, should you still bill the assistant surgeon charges?
If the indicator is 1, you can submit them to Medicare if you choose to. Medicare, however, is not going to make payment, and Medicare's remittance advice will tell you that you can't bill the patient for that. What Medicare is basically saying with that indicator of 1 is that the protocols and the information that CMS has states that this is not normally done, and therefore Medicare is not going to make payment at it. So bottom line is you can submit it if you choose to. You don't have to with the indication of 1, but you also cannot bill the patient.
Okay, and the last question that I see, a couple people sent questions to me privately, and if you by chance sent them to Ellen privately, she can't see them. So if I've overlooked any, make sure you drop them in the chat. But the last one that I can see is from Debbie, and it says, do you have a presentation on modifiers 62 and 66?
Off the top of my head, I don't know if we have done those as part of our modifier Mondays, which is, kind of what this one is. Place that either within the chat. Also, you can place that within the survey that we're getting ready to show you here in just a second, as a topic that you want to see within the future. And we can certainly take a look at that. You can also go into our YouTube channel um, and do a search for Modifier 62, and you can see whether or not we have anything out there on that one also.
And there
And
are
that,
no further questions at this time.
okay. Um, so the bottom line with assistant at surgery modifiers is you're just want to make sure that you're using the correct one. Again, the AS modifier makes a difference in payment. And so, if you're billing for a non-physician practitioner, you want to be using that modifier. If you're billing under an MD or a DO, then you have the 80, 81, or 82 that you can use. And then, of course, your surgeon only bills for the surgery. Your assistant at surgery is going to bill for their charges. And one other question, or this possibility just popped into my head. You may have private payers that pay before Medicare that don't recognize that AS modifier. And, obviously they can do whatever they want to do. However, when you bill that to Medicare, you have to have that AS on there if you're billing from a non-physician practitioner. Even, if the primary insurance doesn't, won't let you use it, when you bill to Medicare, that's the one that you do have to use. Billing us either the 80, 81, or 82, because that's what the primary insurance requires. That's inappropriate for Medicare purposes. So Aline will check one more time. Do we have any additional? So on behalf of Aline and myself, we do want to thank you for your attendance today. We know you guys have a lot on your plate already, and taking the time to learn the Medicare rules on the assistant at surgery modifiers is just invaluable for your practice and for the Medicare Trust Fund. Again, we ask you to take just those few minutes to complete that survey. We're very interested in your feedback. Not only is this used for reporting to CMS, and to our upper management, but it also lets us know what you want as far as the education, and then lets us know if we can improve our presentations for you in the future. So again, on behalf of Aline and myself, we thank you very much for your attendance, and you can now disconnect.